yesterday we started to think about the resurrection of Jesus. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, then we can discount his claim to be the Son of God. But yesterday we saw that the evidence of an empty tomb in those early days of the apostles preaching in Jerusalem, that evidence was too strong to deny. His enemies said, well, the disciples stole the body. And so yesterday we asked, is that something they might have done? Is it something they could have done? Well, it seems unlikely. Imagine Roman soldiers falling asleep. Such a thing was punishable by death. Even if they had fallen asleep, imagine what a feat it would have been for the disciples to have tiptoed around the sleeping soldiers and then pushed the rock that sealed the entrance to the tomb and then crept off with the body. All of that without waking the guards. Well, the disciples were anything but brave at this point, and so it seems unlikely that they were capable of such a task. However, imagine they were. Imagine somehow they pulled it off. And not long after, they're boldly preaching in Jerusalem that Jesus is raised, that Jesus is risen from the dead. Now, preaching that message got them in serious trouble. They're in and out of prison. A follower of Jesus got stoned to death. Today we live in a world of terrorism. We see people willing to die in the cause of their religion because they sincerely believe their religion to be true. However, would the disciples have been so willing to give their lives for something that they knew to be false? Perhaps then they were sincere men who mistakenly thought they had met the risen Jesus. Maybe in their grief they dreamt it or they'd hallucinated. But we read of Jesus appearing to the disciples and eating with them. Hallucinations don't eat. The Apostle Paul wrote his letter to the Corinthian church about 15 to 20 years after the death of Jesus. He wrote this: Christ appeared to Peter, then to the 12. After this he appeared to more than 500 other followers. Most of them are still alive, but some have died. Paul writes about people who could say, I was there, I saw him. He implies that if anyone reading his letter wanted to check these things out for themselves, they could do so. They'd be able to compare the accounts of those who were there to see if things added up and held together. It seems that there is no room for any idea that the resurrection is a legend that developed over time. Christianity collapses without the historical fact of the resurrection, but Christians are not called to blind faith. The evidence is compelling. If Jesus is really risen, the implications are huge. If Jesus is risen, then what he said about himself is really true. If Jesus really did rise from the dead, then he really is the man who was God. If Jesus rose from the dead, it means that the good news he brought us is true. And we are sinful people who have wandered away from God, but he came to rescue us. He paid the penalty that guilty sinners deserve as he died on the cross. The fact that he is risen means there is no more price to pay for sin. Jesus has done it all for those who trust him.